Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner from Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern from Talent and Teams Consulting. And today we are again joined by two wonderful guest coaches with us. I have the pleasure of introducing Cindy Butts. Cindy is obsessed with people and their talent and how they show up in their world with that talent. She's the founder of Grow with Strengths, she's a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, an ACE certified coach, and she has worked in HR leadership roles in the well-being industry for her entire career. Her expertise in facilitating engaging, lively, and memorable workshops and team conversations supports companies and teams to develop their talent, raising the bar on their individual and collective performance. Cindy lives in beautiful Barrington, Rhode Island, fellow New Englander like myself, and her work takes her across the country, both in person and on Zoom. And for listeners of the show, you may recognize Cindy from our Woo episode. So welcome back, Cindy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chad and Jen, for having me back. I'm really excited to talk about a different strength today.
Awesome.
Yes, welcome back, Cindy. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Louann McCurdy. Louann comes to us from Vancouver, BC. She is an Eat to Grow certified, a Gallup Strengths certified, and an ICF coach. She is the co-founder of her consulting business, which is called Perspectives Consulting. She has had careers in engineering and information technology. She was a programmer, a data analyst, and a project leader. She is a career coach and has led training and development for teams. She's lived and worked in 5 countries: Canada, France, the United States, Singapore, and India. And she's also a past chair of the Status of Women and Human Rights, as well as the University Women's Club of Vancouver. Welcome, Louann.
Thank you. So great to be here with you guys.
Well, I'm already feeling that we're the presence of some real powerhouses today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's my honor to have the both of you on because we're here to talk about strategic today. So the CliftonStrengths Talent theme of strategic. And before Chad shares with us what that is, can you share with us where this falls in your top 5, Cindy?
Strategic is my number 3.
All right, great. And Louann?
Strategic is my number 1.
Awesome. And Chad, just to level set us, where is this for you?
Yeah, so this is one of the ones that is not particularly high. This is number 26 for me. So this is, again, we're going to be one of those episodes where I learn a lot and may not have much to contribute.
Me too. And that's because it's that 34 for me, all the way at the bottom. So, like we said, we have some powerhouses on with us today. Sitting at spot number 1 and spot number 3 in Louann and Cindy. We're really excited to have them on to talk to us about the CliftonStrengths Talent theme of strategic. Chad, tell us what Gallup has to say about that.
Sure. So as we always do at the beginning of every episode, share the Gallup definition. Gallup has this to say: so people exceptionally talented in the strategic theme create alternative ways to proceed. Faced with any given scenario, they can quickly spot the relevant patterns and issues. So that's a great place to start, but it is only a starting place. And we have 2 people that likely live this very much in their day-to-day lives, unlike Jen and I. And so I'd like to start off, and Louann, I'm going to come to you first with this question. We know that our themes don't live in silo, but for the sake of starting this episode off, we'd like to understand how this strategic theme in particular kind of by itself shows up for you in your life, how it might show up in your coaching, where does it get demonstrated, and how might people see it?
Sure. So back in the old days, before phones, when you're driving from one place to the next, I always had 3 or 4 different routes, and I would choose the route that best suited the time of day and the traffic and all of that. But now we have the phones do the thinking for us. But right now, today, You can think, for me, strategic is always thinking. It's that planning ahead, thinking for obstacles, having different options all the time. And how that shows up, obviously for driving, that's kind of a metaphor for life.
Right.
But when I'm coaching, I'm also thinking for my coachees. Where are they going? What are their options? What can they do? And that's that kind of yearning for finding the best route forward that I think shows up as my strategic.
Excellent. Cindy, what about you? What resonated there? I'm already starting to see little smiles showing up. I know that there's going to be some similarities, some differences. What about you? How does this show up for you?
Now, for me, the strength strategic is I'm known as being really creative and coming up with solutions, pathways, options that maybe somebody else hasn't thought of, but in an intuitive way. Sometimes it's hard for me to explain how I got from, A to B. So I have to be careful with that and make sure I can explain what those pathways look like. But one thing Louann was talking about, driving in different routes, but I have this odd obsession with doors, and
Oh, really?
it sounds really strange, but I think of all the different pathways as different doors that you're going through. So there might be, I literally visualize doors, and when I travel, I take pictures of doors all the time. So just thinking of maybe like 4 different beautiful doorways that look different, and that are different sizes and shapes and colors, and which door will we open and go through that is the best pathway forward, given the particular scenario for myself, and then also for presenting different pathways as I coach teams and individuals. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Already starting off some great imagery for people, for our listeners. I'm just already starting to understand this theme a little bit more myself. Cindy, one of the things you and I have talked about in the past about this theme, because as I said, I don't have it high, and so I've sometimes come to you to consult on this one. But you've often mentioned that bullet lists that I like as a deliberative responsibility, analytical driven individual. That's not necessarily how you think and how you organize information. Can you talk to our listeners about sort of how you organize information and maybe not the bullet list version that I'm used to?
Right, the opposite of bullet lists. Yeah, it might look really messy, or if I were a great artist, it would be beautiful. But the way I organize information is in pictures, visuals. So it might be circles, arrows, just lots of pictures, but not a list. The opposite of a list. So something that takes themes, patterns, organizes things, but perhaps through using something as simple as smart art in PowerPoint, or just creating my own pictures. I use smart art a lot to help.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
I had a question for Louann, because she shared with us before about really like a persistence to your strategic. Can you share a little bit with our audience about that?
Absolutely. So I find, and this is my opinion and also my experience working with others that have strategic, but there's that energizing feeling when you're presented in a situation that requires, that maybe is a little stuck or maybe has some obstacles, but there's that feeling of like, great, here's an opportunity. Let's see how we can get around this obstacle. And that energy just fuels itself. So one decision leads to another, and it's enjoyable. Like the path is enjoyable. So when someone says, oh, we can't do this, or this is difficult, strategic says, great, let's figure something out. So it never feels stuck, and it has a perpetual kind of motion feeling.
Oh, that's awesome. A little different than our deliberatives there, Chad. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Well, as she was talking, I was recalling that, or noticing that our deliberatives tend to get the energy from noticing the roadblocks. Oh,
Right.
we can bring this up, sort of surfacing it. And what I'm hearing is almost the follow-on energizing aspect, which is, okay, now that we've brought them out, now these wonderful people are going to figure out how we get around it, so that we don't feel like we've got to be both announcer and solver. We can start to just focus on the noticing and calling it out, and then strategic, as Louann has started to describe it, has that ability to get right over it. I love that.
Yeah, it's that power of two happening right
Oh,
there.
right. Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to take us into our next questions. And Cindy, I'm going to come to you with this one first. So we know, again, like Chad said, they're not in silo, but we want to think about strategic specifically for these few questions. And the first one is double-edged sword. Every strength has a good side and a bad side, and it's whether we're overusing it, maybe it's a little on the raw side, in just ways that it trips us up and gets in our way. So what are some ways that you feel like strategic might negatively impact your life?
One way is when we see all these pathways and someone's not really that interested. People will just share, whether it's not in the coaching situation, I guess, but just in life, when people tell you something, and those of us with high strategic may come out with, have you considered these 3 different options? And if we get a blank stare, it means like, no, they're not really interested in what we have to say. And often that can come off as like critical, because they may have had something that they were considering, and then we're bringing up all these different options, which they may feel like we dismiss what they came up with originally. So I guess if we're not really invited in to use our strategic and we use it anyway, that's when it's it gets in our way, and we have to just kind of go, okay, step back, calibrate that strength.
Yeah. Is it hard to not jump in and try to solve those problems?
Is it hard?
That face.
Yes, and Louann, you can see on her, she has 3 strategic thinking themes in her top 5. I have 4 in my top 10. I lead with strategic thinking themes. So it's really hard, even if you just isolate the strategic, because we're always thinking, it kind of doesn't stop. And I can't wait for Louann to talk about this, because she's got the strategic ideation combination, which is so powerful.
So Louann, yeah, what would you share with us? How is strategic maybe gotten in your way in the past?
Oh man, gets in the way all the time. Practical example, my husband has achiever, and he has that real achiever energy to get things done. I mean, it's palpable, that energy. And if we do a project together, I'll want to map out different options and before making the commitment to do the project. But in the meantime, boom, he's already started. So there's that working with others kind of aspect about strategic that I would advise we all take note of. Like, we don't work in isolation. So inviting people into the thinking process, or like appreciating that they might not be interested in thinking about the what ifs, makes for a better partnership.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so good.
Okay,
can I flip it, or do you have a question?
Well, I've got an observation and a question. What is that, Louann, Cindy started to bring up that you have these 3 amazing strategic thinking, domain related talent themes: strategic, ideation, learner. And Cindy had also mentioned about how this can be a very thinky theme. And I've got learner, and analytical, so I'm coming into this with a bit of a strategic thinking note to this. But I'm wondering, do you ever get too thinky, or what is that like? How does that end up maybe on that rawer side of this talent theme? Or do you
Yeah.
experience that? And if so, does it have like a drastic sort of raw side?
Yes, I can get too thinky, as anyone with, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, I say. So what's really important for me and what I've learned, it's been such a eye opener in my world, partnering with people that have different strengths, so important. So my business partner, Stephanie Kunar, has strengths that I don't have. And together, because we both each know our strengths and we lean into each other's strengths, and it's crazy helpful. I have a client who has strategic in her top 5, and I was asking her about what does their strategic look like on overdrive, and she says, "Oh, bull in a china shop, chaos, too many things, too kind of airy in that way." So, note to anybody that has strategic, and I do call it a kind of a slippery strength, because it's a little bit under the radar, and it's good and it's bad and it's helpful, but you really have to rein it in, partner with other people, and realize the goal is to get something done, not just to think about it.
Nice. Yeah. And thank you so much for that, because one of the other observations I was having about both of your answers, and I don't know if this is a husband to wife thing or if this is just a spouse to spouse thing, but going to Cindy's comment of asking or trying to provide options or solutions when somebody hasn't asked you for them, that's sort of a cliche or stereotype of a lot of husbands. Wife comes home, very emotional situation, the husband's like, well, let's fix it. And I'm guilty of that. I've got Harmony as my sort of problem solver theme that likes to try and jump in and focus on what's solvable. But I was just noticing that in your answers of that want and that ability to jump right in with like, well, here are 3 different options, and the person hasn't actually asked for them. They just want you to listen. So again, I don't know if that's a husband-wife dynamic or just a spouse to spouse. I mean, I'm starting to sense, well, maybe it's not husband-wife. It's just coming with different themes, which is interesting. And then I also have to come to something Louann said about sort of that strategic and then achiever. I have high responsibility and a deliberative that helps me think things through in similar ways to what she said, but that my wife has achiever. I'm wondering if she doesn't get involved with projects with me. She doesn't want to get in the way because she just wants to get it done, and I've got to sort of think it through before I take action. So just some really interesting highlights that I appreciate you pointing out of how this can go maybe not optimal. So
Yeah.
with that said, Jen, I know you want to take us to our next question, because I don't want to dwell on the dark side too long.
I do, because we know, like, it's so important for us to share those like places where we've tripped, because we're still all a work in progress, right? Like, we still don't ever get it just right. Like Chad and I've shared lots and lots of times, our responsibility and our deliberatives definitely, like, we feel like they hold us back just as much as they propel us forward. So in that vein, I want to talk about how your strategic really propels you to success in work and life, just every day. Like, where do you see this theme really helping and benefiting your life? And Louann, I'm going to start with you first this time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I never feel stuck. I have ideation, I have self-assurance in my top 10 also. So there's always a confidence that things can improve, or there's always something one can do. And it's interesting because I thought everybody was like that. I didn't realize until I got more in the coaching world that people do have that sense of stuckness sometimes. And I always feel free and willing to try and willing to do something different, just to move things along. So how's that for a start?
Oh my gosh, that's great. And I love that you don't feel stuck. What a wonderful place to be. Cindy, what about you? Does any of that resonate with you?
It does. It does. And I think, if we really think about just kind of focusing in on the strategic theme, when I honor that, or kind of think of, I think of my strengths as tools and really pull out the strategic, it's really easy to see patterns and themes
Mm.
in just about anything. So with a client, it's easy to be able to see the patterns and themes that are going on in their organization with teams. Even thinking about like their core values, their mission, and then how people are showing up, and putting something together for the client that makes sense, that it summarizes kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then a way that I use it that has nothing to do with work is, and you just made me think of this, Chad, when you were talking about our important relationships. My husband will often ask, like 4 minutes into a movie or into a show, he say, "What's the theme? What's the theme?" And because it's easy for me to be able to pick out, like, oh, this is, the theme of this is like earning respect, or the theme is like disrupting something, like, I don't know, something. So that's kind of a fun way, really leaning into it, to see patterns, to see themes. And I think the one other quick thing is that it gives me courage when I use it and share the patterns and themes, and people are really grateful and say, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. That still gives me courage to continue to use it, because we are presenting, Louann, right? We're presenting something to people that they didn't see before. So sometimes it feels a little, I don't know, scary is a silly word, but sometimes it feels like, well, you think other people can see it, but they can't. So yeah, courage is something.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Sydney, I want to build on something you said, because I think you and I got talking about this thing at another moment, and you said something about vision and sort of being able to sort of see the periphery a little bit better than I think we were maybe. My analytical has that ability to see patterns too, but you brought a different, no pun intended here, but a different lens that seemed to be a bit more broader than what I'm used to seeing in terms of, the data right in front of me. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of peripheral vision aspect of this theme?
Yeah, I think about it as being able to, we talked about the pathways, but seeing like around corners, above, under, over, through, and having literally like peripheral vision with glasses that can just see and pull all that information together, whether it's broad brush themes or details as well. And I guess I have input as my number 2.
Okay.
So as I'm talking, right, that's kind of probably more meshing those two than anything else.
Got it.
And it's so
vision.
interesting, after doing our connectedness episode, I'm really hearing some of that connectedness to it too, that periphery.
Yeah. Well, this is a wonderful lead-in. I mean, Cindy, I hope you're still with us. I just noticed. Oh, there you are. There she is.
Back now. I just saw that something's unstable. Sorry.
Yeah. You actually led us right into our next question. So we've been talking about this theme as sort of a standalone. I want to start bringing back in that, this doesn't work in silos, that they're always interacting. We've already talked about Louann's. You've got 3 great strategic thinking, other strategic thinking themes. So in that vein, I'd like to ask, are there, and Cindy, I'm going to come to you first on this. I'm wondering if there's themes that you lean on to maybe even accelerate the benefit of strategic, or help you make your contribution through strategic that much better. Are there particular themes that help you do that?
Right. And I kind of just alluded to one in particular.
Yeah.
Leaning on the combination of input and strategic. It feels like it's like the librarian in me, where I have all of this information, and when I can pull it, find it, whether it's a Google Doc or literally a book on a shelf, or a magazine article or a link or something that informs a pathway forward. So that input strategic is really, really important. It also helps stories. I think about stories, like the input combination with strategic. I come up with stories and examples that are useful for people to remember. And my activator, I have activator. And that's really that strength when I combine it, pair it up with strategic, it helps me to just do it, like just stop overthinking and just circling the plane, thinking and creating more pathways, which doesn't, often enough is enough. So the activator just helps just do it, get it done.
Nice. I love that we've already started to bring in achiever and activator. Both are well known for their ability to get things in motion. So that's fantastic. Louann, I want to come to you with sort of the same question, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there's even a build on of getting things into action. But I'm curious, what two or three themes do you think you really kind of pull into your strategic to make it that much better?
Yeah, so we talked about my strategic and ideation and self-assurance, but let's add a couple more. So why not? We have options.
The options.
We have options. So I have connectedness, and when used well, my connectedness sees some of the unseen pieces, or maybe the bigger picture, maybe the environment, and that can be helpful. But the other part is maximizer. So maximizer is not about finding the best option necessarily, but finding like the efficiency in my mind to get things done. Get it done, get it on time, get it on budget. And I really, you can think of maximizer as good to great, but I think of great, what does great really mean, And I say great means getting the job done on time, on budget. And if I keep reminding myself that way, then strategic, instead of having a little strategic party over here, strategic ideation party, they're thinking like, our job is to get to the finish line. And so I find that very grounding and helpful.
That is awesome. I love that.
So good.
Cindy, I saw you smile and giggle a little bit on Louann's answer. Was there something that came to mind for you, or that you wanted to add to that? Because I know that there are similarities, but there are also differences between people that have the same thing. So I was just wondering if there was something there.
I just like Louann's description of her strategic ideation party. I have ideation also in my 6 through 10, and learner in my 6 through 10. Yeah, so we have so many common themes, and just that overthinking happiness with just thinking about things is our happy place, right? Yeah. So I love that. I love that term. I'm going to remember that, Louann.
Hey, come on over.
Strategic ideation party.
Yeah.
It's so great, but nothing gets done.
Yeah. Sounds a little bit like my learner party, but that's a topic for a different podcast. I love that we're already starting to talk about some of the benefits of bringing different themes to the party. Sometimes we know that some of these parties that we're talking about, the themes get going a little strong, get a little bit of steam behind them. I want to, it's not about reining in, but it is about sort of managing that steam and figuring out the right level of application. I'm curious if you could help some of our listeners, and maybe some people that are starting to learn about their own strategic, think about maybe some other combos that help you manage your strategic. So maybe the party doesn't get going too loud that wakes the neighbors, but still finds a way to apply. So I'm just wondering, Louann, I'm going to actually come to you first with this. Is there a theme that you lean into to kind of bring you back from a full-on, strategic runaway?
10 steps ahead of someone
else. What sort of brings you back to the best application of that sort of Goldilocks zone that we've talked about in some of our other episodes?
Yeah, you make me think, and maybe this is my connectedness coming out, is like, okay, who else is in the room? Like, nothing happens in isolation. So who is in the room with me, virtual or otherwise, that and what are we doing, right? Like, what's the point in being together? So because I'm like super strong in strategic thinking themes, I really rely on these other themes to get things done. So so I guess it depends on who's in the room, and no matter who it is, I'll find a way to work with them.
Okay. So building on that, if you were to think about just yourself, you talked about doing a lot of thinking on your own. Is there a particular theme of your own that you lean on to kind of bring that strategic back into its best application?
Sure, like maximizer for sure. I try and channel a little bit of focus or deliberative. I know it's lower for me, but I'm learner, so I kind of think, what would I like to be focused now? So let's try it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks. Cindy, what themes do you lean on to bring this strategic theme sort of back in check?
Yeah, I use my achiever, and I have to ask myself, what does success look like? The same question that I ask clients and individuals that I coach. What does success look like? Let's paint a really clear picture of what success looks like. And I use my achiever to ground me, to remember, what are you doing again? When I get lost in, I don't know, in making a certain, like even something specific as making a slide just right and beautiful. Like I can get lost in that. And I think, okay, I just spent way too much time on this one slide. What does success look like? It's great. This is fine. Move on. Right.
Nice.
So it grounds me and then gives momentum. I think that's the one. And then I have activator before I told you. And that also sometimes I think just move on. Like you're done.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm hearing lots of what ifs. Like you guys must constantly have what if questions going on in your head and like, oh, what if this? And then moving on to the next thing. Is that true, Louann?
Are you reading my mind?
We're trying.
Yes. What if? So what ifs are wonderful, and also like it can sound a bit like a problem. Like, what if this problem happens? What if that problem happens? And just realize that, hey, it's all for the greater good, right? We're just looking to I like this question Cindy posed, what does success look like? So what does success look like? And what if something happens this way? What are we going to do? And what are we going to do that way?
So I have to ask another follow-up to that, because I was thinking about the what ifs with us. So Chad and I, what if a lot, but it comes from a different place, that deliberative, looking for the risks, the pitfalls, what could get in our way of getting this project done. So, a completely different flip of that coin, with the momentum behind it. But we tend to get stuck in those what ifs because of the roadblocks. And you've told us that your strategic doesn't get stuck. Is your strategic ever done?
Never.
Look at the
Both
faces,
of them are like,
and they're like,
not a chance.
Are you kidding me?
No, yeah.
It's way too good. No.
Nice.
Drink the Kool-Aid. Drink the strategic Kool-Aid. You're gonna love it.
I love it. Cindy, did that bring anything up for you? Because I saw you really slow, like, no.
It did. And one funny thing that I hadn't really thought about before is I love a debrief. Like that if there's an abrupt finish to anything, like anything, it can be a movie, a show, even a conversation, an event. I want to then do the debrief, talk about what it means, what are the themes, what are the potential next steps, and really explore that. It might not even be useful, like somebody else might not even care. Luann, I could see you nodding.
Yeah.
But it's our happy place to do a debrief. And I don't think I'd thought about it like that before. So we always learn something new when we're really honing in and discussing our strengths. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Luann.
I'm going to pop in because I hadn't thought of that until just now. And remember back in the days of coach training when you would have a coachee, and then an observer, and then you'd have the coaching, and then maybe there would be a debrief after. I love the debriefs. I was like, oh, let's play that again. Well, what if this had happened and that? Or what if this response was different? And I love that. So yeah, isn't that interesting? Like strategic can also look backwards to kind of replay or just think about all the what ifs that have happened.
I'm hearing that,
cool.
looking for the options again.
Yeah.
That's such that's something I'm coming away with that's just so different than, as Jen has mentioned, the deliberative side.
Yeah, right.
I think about solutions from a harmony toned place, and finding those options or finding the potential solutions, but not nearly at the level of how many options you both seem to generate out of each opportunity. Going back to the metaphor of the doors, how many different doors can you open? Whereas, Jen and I, with this not being a particularly high theme for us, this strategic, that our doors are not as numerous, and that there's not as much looking around. It's okay, once we've sort of found a solution, we just kind of move forward with it. I know Jen and I have talked, and it's on both our achiever and activator episodes. Once Jen's found an option, it's like, all right, let's just go.
Yeah.
And goes back to Luann's husband as well. Once the first option's been posed, it's action start. So
Absolutely. And I 100% felt that when Luann, you shared that about your husband has already taken your one idea and moved it into action. Yeah, that happens with me all the time. Okay, so I want to take us to our next question, which is in thinking about us as coaches and others that we've worked with. We might have had some contact and experience with clients that have strategic, but are maybe using it in a different way than what we're hearing here, or maybe a unique spin to it. I personally haven't had a lot of strategic thinkers, but the ones I have talked with, it's always about this pathways. So that's not new information to me. So Luann, you nodded right away. Did you have one to share with us?
I have one to share, and I was so struck by this client because she was so excited about her strategic when she learned about it. And in her words, like she said, she's always been able to know what a plan will look like as it is deployed. And then should problems arise, have the plan B or C in her mind. So everything was like this map of deployment, and any idea, it was like, to me, it was like a little Post-it note that got like put on the map. So that was so exciting to her that it made it very exciting to me. So that's my little snippet for you.
Nice. How about you, Cindy? Have you had any unique experiences?
Yeah, I think of a couple. One is a leader that has strategic, competition, self-assurance, and achiever.
Oh,
wow.
okay.
Right.
I gotta hear about this combo. This is
Yeah.
intriguing.
So it's really interesting. There's a real push and intensity and focus. He also has focus.
Wow.
So there's this intensity, laser focus on the goal and the potential paths to get there, with his strategic, but high in like measuring the success. Where are they in those checkpoints? They're really clear what the checkpoints are. So the combination of those strengths, just feels very, very different than Luann and I have these very different backgrounds that we have, but the way we think and the amount that we like to think is different. I also was just thinking of another client in particular, but lots of people that I work with that have strategic and also high relationship building themes, people that have been in the wellness industry, well-being industry. I have some clients that are in the mental health part of the wellness industry. So they often have really high relationship building themes. And a few people I can think of that have strategic plus like a boatload of relationship building. Empathy, developer, relator, right? That then strategic is really like people-centric is what I think of.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like all of the solutions are built around
The
people,
people.
Yeah.
right? So it feels really different. It still has lots of pathways, but it's so generous is the word that comes to mind.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting when we get to particularly these last two questions. You know, the ones about which themes come to play, and the different patterns we've seen in some potential clients. Because I loved everything that you shared at the beginning about how these themes show up for you individually. But I think some of our learners, especially if they're some of our listeners, when they're starting to see, trying to figure out where they fit in this conversation, hearing the differences and where relationship building themes is sort of coloring it in one direction, whereas Louann, I've loved hearing about all your strategic thinking themes and how those sort of pile together to provide even more thinking around it. And then we've even talked on the action side, the achiever, the activator, where there's a real sort of focus on get stuff done, but having those multiple pathways. I'm so blessed and so thankful that you're sharing all this for both of us and our listeners. So I just want to say thank you. That was just my learners soaking this all up and seeing how many different ways the strategic can come out has been really interesting.
Your harmony. I hear your harmony. The
Yeah.
kindness.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's not what I was trying to focus on. It was just so interesting to see so many different perspectives.
And I like it. It's almost like this flavoring, right? So
Yeah.
we could talk about the strategic and it's one certain way, but depending on what other little spices you have that you're putting with it, it flavors it just a little differently. Like maybe we're all different cookies, oatmeal and raisin or chocolate chip, something. It just brings that whole different richness to it when we see it in other people and can really celebrate what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
I just pop in because
Yeah.
I think, Jen, you're deliberative. You've mentioned it a few times. And I was thinking, well, deliberative and strategic, how does that work together? What can how can strategic benefit from deliberative in a cool way, right?
Yeah.
So, what popped in my mind was, yeah, like naming the problem
Mm-hmm.
rather than strategic trying to avoid it or
Right.
come up with a solution. It's like, no, and we're going to name this problem and we're going to solve it. And I'm thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
that would give strategic a break from having to do so many workarounds.
Sure. Oh,
You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Chad and I talk about that a lot, that we're able to see those things right away, and it comes off almost Debbie Downer, because we're pointing out where something might not work or where the risk is, and where we've heard from others where some are really like energized by whatever that is, they're going to go around it, like it doesn't matter, like they're just going to go the easy way or something. Whereas like I see you're strategic in seeing all the different ways to tackle that problem, and what a powerful combination to have a work partner with strategic, for Chad, to be able to really actually work with what other options are available, and then us to be able to say, oh yeah, but yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Nice. So I want to take us into our next question, because we've gotten really deep into this. I'd actually like to bring it a little bit more to the surface, because there are some listeners that are, we know, Jen and I know a little bit of our audience, they're just getting to know their strengths, or they're trying to figure out how to work with somebody that has this particular talent theme. And one of the ways that we have tried to open that door, to use Sydney's metaphor a little bit, is to include a little segment on images or maybe even pop culture references that might start to give a window into this theme. And so I'm just curious if there's a picture, or again, a pop culture reference. I know on one of our last episodes, I think Jen even brought in a particular song. It doesn't have to be a song, but that might highlight this strategic theme in a way that makes it a little bit more approachable. And so, Cindy, I'm wondering if there's an image that you would go to describe this theme.
There is, and it's a little odd. I'm an old gymnast, a former and old gymnast. So maybe if everyone channels their inner Simone Biles to think about this. When I think about my strategic, I think about my floor routine when I was in college.
Okay.
And so if you imagine Simone Biles, right, she has 4 different major tumbling passes, and each one of those she has a plan, but then she has to have options depending on how much energy she has with the same degree of difficulty.
Okay.
So I kind of close my eyes and kind of think about what the pathways are for gymnastics many years ago, but then channel that for present day, for thinking about workshops that I'm running or anything in my life. What are those different options? And we'll like visualize, kind of play it out. So my visual is, I guess, my gymnastics routine.
Excellent.
But now I can picture Simone's.
Yeah, awesome.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Louann, what image would you use to introduce strategic to somebody?
I think I'm going to offer 2 small ones.
Sure.
I'm still thinking of Simone Biles right now. Like, oh, that's such a great image. I so love that one. But one is a mind map that kind of starts at a beginning and cascades into so many different forks, but it ultimately has an end. So there's a way of spreading out and then bringing it to closure. Almost, maybe there's a little musical thing in there. I don't know. But that's one. And the other one is, you remember back in the day, I don't know if you did any algebra or any kind of logic training, if this, then that, if A, then B, it's B like C, is A like C, that kind of thing. And it's that kind of set of logic statements. It could even be like computer code, just cascading
Nice.
if then statements that take you to the end.
Yeah.
Those are
Those
fantastic.
are great.
Thank you.
Mine are really kind of on the like, well, I mean, being that this is my 34th talent, I cannot even say that I completely understand it. But what I think of the most is, those strategic games we play as kids or as we grow up. Chess, checkers, Connect Four is strategic. I found out because I lose all the time. Tic-tac-toe or the board game card game Sequence is very strategic.
Nice.
And I love that game, but I'm horrible at it. But I want to like it, but I can't seem to really get there. So those are mine, Chad. What about you?
Nice. So I'm gonna use a reference from here in my home state of Vermont, and anybody that's in and around mountains will resonate with this. We have 2 fairly large mountains here in Vermont, and they have something like 37 different trails that all lead to the top. And so it's that the set of options you get to every fork in the hiking paths provides you a new opportunity. It kind of builds on something that our both Louann and Cindy have talked about, is that sense of options or opportunity. But you might just start at one particular trailhead, but then still find 9 different ways to the top of the mountain, and that's ultimately the goal. So sort of that hiking trail map is one that I often think of when I think about introducing this theme to new coachees that have it.
That's a really great visual. Because I can see that one. That one makes sense to me. I'm a trail person, so yeah, that makes sense to me. Oh, I really like that too. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah.
Okay, so to kind of get us to the place where we're going to almost wrap up here, right? We have another couple questions, and this one is specifically about thinking about someone who has strategic high. So as we think about how others who are going to interact with someone who has strategic in their top 5, what advice would you give to team leaders or peers to help the person with strategic offer their best contribution to the team? And Louann, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So every strategic person I've met says, give me freedom, give me opportunities, give me power to make decisions. But what I would have them do is give them the opportunity to be at the front end of a new initiative, right at the beginning, where the kind of the planning phase, somewhere in there. And maybe, give them I always think of a whiteboard, but you know, give them an opportunity to map out some different options, but then ask them to present their ideas. So consolidate some of the options, explain some of their thinking so it doesn't come across as too out there. It's like a solid plan. So that's how I would suggest.
Great. Cindy, how about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I would ask for, often leaders are asking people they work with for solutions. And if you have strategic and you're overusing or it's raw, that's going to freak you out because you don't come up with one solution, you come up with multiple solutions. So I would ask for someone that has high strategic to come up with kind of a draft options that they're considering. I like that word recommended when I'm coaching someone, you know, what are you considering? And they'll kind of look up and they'll say, well, there's 4 things, you know, there's, so they've already got them, right? It's like trying to draw those things out. Another thing is to ask for a visual of some kind that demonstrates what they're thinking, right? To help them, maybe like what Louann was saying, help them really bring all of their ideas together. Because sometimes when you have strategic, you have so much information in your head, especially if you have input and strategic, strategic and ideation, right? Right. So we need help in sorting sometimes. So sometimes a visual helps make it clear for that person. So yeah, asking for a draft, encouraging that creativity, helping them not have to focus. That was an awkward sentence, but you know what I mean? Not have to focus on one solution, but what are the options? What are you considering?
Really great.
I have sort of a follow-up question to that, and this just hit me. It was not something I was originally thinking about when it came to strategic, and this may be coming from a responsibility tinted lens, but I am curious about how important is the end goal for strategic? Because we've talked about options and opening up different pathways and opportunities to get someplace, and we've talked about doing things. But one of the things I just realized is both of you offered wonderful answers, and I appreciate the advice. But I'm curious about how important is that end goal to somebody with strategic. And I don't know who wants to pick that up. It was just a question that just sort of hit me after both of your responses, which were wonderful. But it did get me thinking about, in terms of advice, and you know, Jen here with executing.
Like, please tell me that.
Executing high. I am just kind of curious, like, where does that come into play?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have just one example that I can think of is where strategic has been really useful. When I was in an HR role inside of an organization, and like, come up with a learning plan for the organization. What does that look like? That's like, oh, this is so right. And so it might be, what it looks like is 3 slides or even 2 slides, right? And then presenting that to the organization. Here's what we're going to do. These are the topics. This is the way we're going to implement. These are the meeting rhythms, the whole strategy, the philosophy, a mission statement, right? It encompasses all of that. So then the do with something like that that's so creative happens in the implementation, which is a whole separate thing.
Okay.
Sure.
I hadn't thought about that example until you asked that question, but that might be an easy way to think about, like, how useful is it? Because sometimes it just the way we're talking about it, it might feel like people are just sitting there thinking. Like,
well, I love it. Like, what I just heard is she's given me the map, and now I can take on the responsibility. My activator, my achiever can like jump onto that and be like, okay, now I know where we're going and all these different things that have to be involved and implemented, and now I can take those steps and actually start to move it forward, because coming up with it, that's not me.
Yeah.
So what a wonderful way to show that your goal really, or your aim really, is that end goal, but it's in not necessarily the doing, but the creating.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Right. And it can happen fast, Luann, right? Like it's because we've already been thinking about it. It's not like, oh, this is the first time I've thought about it. I mean, for something like that, right? But Luann, you probably have examples that are.
Yeah, and I did want to come to an end with that same sort of
Yeah.
question. Like, where's the end point? What sort of emphasis does the end point get in this thinking and coming up with options? Because one visual I was starting to get is you have a starting point, where we are in our present, and you could branch out in a zillion different directions, but never bring it back. Luann, I loved some of your comments have been around bringing it back to something, but it's part of why I'm asking the question of how important is that point upon which you have to bring things back, or does that not have to exist? So what importance does that closure point carry?
Yeah, Chad, that's such an insightful question, and you got me. Like you're like,
sorry,
oh, busted. Hashtag busted on that, because maybe strategic doesn't care. Maybe. I don't know. That was my first reaction. You think of like strategic plans that are created and maybe not used. Then I was thinking, then I had a little chat with my strategic strength, thinking, okay, what would it be just to have a plan, create the plan, and nothing happens? And what came up was strategic will never know what happens. So there is that desire. Strategic also has that desire to see what actually happened. So I think it's possible for strategic to come off as, like the dark side of strategic, like we'll just think it out, plan it, but not care. But the reality is strategic needs to care, because it needs to know how it unfolds.
And hearing that debrief is important.
I was exactly thinking the same thing when she was like, "Oh, this is Sydney's comment about debriefs."
Yeah.
So
That their strategic wouldn't like not knowing what happened and how we got there at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, really great question, Chad. Good job.
Every once in a while, I find one. No, and I really appreciate your willingness to think that question through, because it was a little on the fly. But it seems that on the fly is a realm in which strategic has some wonderful power to contribute. So there's something, Jen and I keep coming back to, talking about a responsibility. That's one of the core ones that she and I share really high. But you have to, like, an endpoint for us is critical. And so I guess I was, again, putting that kind of lens on what you've been sharing, but then this idea of branching out, but then, like the mountaintop, analogy, how important is it for you to land on the right mountaintop? And so that's sort of where that question came from. Thank you so much for entertaining my bit ambitious question there. We have thoroughly enjoyed everything you've shared, and I'm sure that your strategic and our my learner at least would love to go another hour talking about all the variations of this theme. But I would like to start to bring this in for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, to a bit of a summary. So, as good coaches, we're going to put the responsibility back on you as our guest to help us summarize the show. So, I'm wondering if each of you could think of 2 or 3 kind of key takeaways that if somebody listened to just the last 5 minutes of this show, what are some of the key things that you would want them to know or consider when thinking about either understanding or engaging with somebody that has strategic? And Cindy, I'm going to come to you first, and then Luann, I'd love to get your 2 or 3 key points as well.
So much to consider.
The options in her brain are just blowing up. Yes.
Yep. Right. I know. Well, I think one thing, and we kind of touched upon this a little bit, but not head on. So I wanted to make sure that we address this, is that to do our best work, those who have strategic, we need time to think.
Okay.
So need like really deep blocks of time to think. And that's when our strategic will come up with our best work. So just remembering that for people that are working with those that have strategic, I think that's really important. I guess another thing is just remembering that we don't think linearly, usually, not all the time, right? But many people who have strategic think in pictures, think in Venn diagrams, think in circles, arrows. And so what you get may not be, just like right now, may not be a fully formed idea. And so people may need to be patient or ask clarifying questions to help draw out what someone is seeing, especially if they're in a meeting and someone says, "What do you think?" And they say, "Well, I think that I see 4 or 5 different options." And someone's like, "Oh, we don't have time for that." Right. Right. And that happens all the time. And then people with strategic get shut down because they start to explain one and it's going to take too long. Right. So asking people in advance to come with their best ideas so that they don't take up too much time or get shot down because in a meeting they don't have time to like think it through and explain. Yeah, a couple of ideas.
Wonderful.
Really great.
Thank you so much for that, Cindy.
Yeah.
Louann, what would be your 2 or 3 key takeaways from this episode, or things that you'd really want people to know and understand about strategic?
Well, the strategic thing, let me start again. I said the word well. The strategic theme in my mind is creative, it's imaginative, and it's persistent. But too much of strategic sounds like too many possibilities, or perhaps just one's own thoughts. So the invitation is to keep things practical and to include others, ask others for their observations, ask others for their concerns and their experiences, so that whatever you're working on, the team, because nothing happens in isolation, things get done in the best possible way.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
That's
Chad,
fantastic.
can I share something that I've loved about
Of
listening
course,
to the two
of
of them?
course.
Yes. So as you and I've shared so many times, having deliberative in our top 5, seeing the roadblocks creates pause for us. It's the let's regroup and find out what's going to happen next. And what I've heard from both Cindy and Louann is that these issues, the problems, the roadblocks, they aren't creating pause for them. It actually energizes them. And I think that's amazing, because coming from a place of where we feel like we're shutting everybody's ideas down because we see those roadblocks and bring them out, having someone with strategic, having Louann and Cindy in our corner and hearing it, they're like, yeah, but, and they now found, now their mind's activated to find all of these other ways around it. And just seeing that energy in both of you, even just to ask you new questions, and you see it, you can see it in your faces as your minds are thinking up all these other ways or answers, the doors and the maps, is just really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah. And
thank you. It's just been a joy to work with the 3 of you, and I've learned a lot about my own strategic just by going through this experience. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, we I'll be the first. I know Jen has already said thank you, so I guess I'll be the second, just to say thank you for your time. You've spent an hour with us, really helping educate the 2 of us. But I'm really hopeful that a lot of the insights that you've shared will be really helpful to our listeners and viewers as they come and engage with the material. And to that point, we would like the conversation to continue. So hopefully, if you've listened to this, either on our ACAST podcast hosted podcast or on either of Energize YouTube channels, that you leave us comments and reviews and engage with the material. And if the strategic theme comes out differently for you, let us know, because that just helps others learn from not just the four of us, but many other voices. So please like, subscribe, comment, all the fun things that all the social media platforms ask you and encourage you to do. We do want this conversation to continue. I know my learner is always energized when we see new comments come in. So with that, Jen, I know you have a couple other comments about just how we can get a hold of these wonderful individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, our information for Chad and me is always available in the show notes. And then for you, our listeners, we leave Louann and Cindy's information there as well. So you can find their LinkedIn connections, their websites. So if you want to get in touch with any of us on from this podcast, please reach out.
Yeah. And so until next time, as we close up the show, I am Chad Ahern from Talent Teams Consulting, encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
And I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching, encouraging you to be uniquely you.